Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and recently I have been doing a series of videos talking about the shuffler algorithm as well as the hand smoothing and draw mechanisms, how those affect your play, and how your play can affect those. And today I want to talk about mana curve because having the proper mana curve and the right mix of lands is probably one of the most influential things you can do to improve your success on Arena, because these are the signals that we're sending to those algorithms that help determine our outcomes. But hey, before we get into all that, I wanted to take just a moment to thank my community for helping the Stronghold reach a bit of a long-term goal here. 1,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. Definitely a tremendous thing. Thank you for all the views, all the subs, all the likes, all the comments, and just generally being a very supportive community. It means so much more than you'll ever know. And hey, what do you do when you reach a goal? You set a new one. So moving forward, my main talking point goal is going to be to reach just 50 followers over on Twitch. And frankly, we're already about halfway there, so this one should be really, really easy. If you're not already following me on Twitch, please consider doing so. And that always gives you kind of a sneak peek of some of the live play content, things like that. And of course, the support continues to help the community grow. And I'll be thinking up a giveaway to do once we get there. Probably not a whole account this time around, but hey, that's okay. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right.
Now, what exactly is mana curve? Mana curve is the idea of having enough spells in each converted mana cost. So during turn 1, you're going to have 1 mana available in most cases, so you want to make sure you have enough 1 mana cost spells in your deck so that you are consistently doing something on that turn. Nobody likes to take a turn off, although the lands that come into play tapped do shift the significance a little bit off of the 1-drop to the 2-drop, but basically mana curve is the idea of having something to do every single turn at every converted mana cost, as well as being able to use 100% of your mana each turn. Because if you have 3 mana in play but you only have a 2 and 4 drop spell, basically you're leaving some mana on the table. This is why later on we'll also talk about mana sinks. So when you get into those larger turns and you have more mana available, you have something that you can be spending it on instead of it going to waste. But again, the idea of mana curve is having something to do every single turn and trying to use as much of your mana each turn as possible. That way your limited resources are going to maximize value in every single game. Now, believe it or not, when you talk about an ideal mana curve, it comes down a lot to what style of deck that you're playing. The main styles, of course, being aggro, mid-range, and control. And believe it or not, mana curve is even affected by things like how many lands that you are running in the deck, because that's going to affect the expected resources, as well as whether you are playing first or playing second. Now, basically, there's 2 kinds of people in the world. Those that can already do the mathematics that are implied with this, and the people who would rather cut their heart out with a spoon. But cousin, why a spoon? Because it'll hurt more, you twit. One of my favorite lines from Robin Hood, the Kevin Costner version. Pretty deplorable movie, but a great line, and gives you a little glimpse into what if your boy Professor Snape had gone full dark side. He plays a really interesting evil character in this. Of course, being Prince John in the Robin Hood series. But enough on that topic. Let's get into some converted mana cost examples rather than breaking down the math. Because if you already know how to do the math, you really don't need me to explain it to you. And if you don't know how to do the math, you probably don't care about it as much as you do the outcome.
And when you start getting away from that stereotype typical average deck, when you start building more of an aggro style, of course, you want to shift that mana base towards the left side of your screen, towards that 1, 2, and 3 drop slots. You can kind of think as the space between the 3 and the 4 drop as the midpoint of your typical deck. On the other hand of things, if you start moving towards control, you want to shift more of your cards into that 4, 5, and 6 slot, and to a lesser degree, the 3 slot. This is going to be a stereotype for those type of decks, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb.
Now, what you see here is a deck we talk about a lot. That is our own bombardment deck, or our mono red super aggro. As you can see, the mana curve here is focused on 1 and 2 drops and a lesser degree of 3 drops. This deck wants to play first, which is why there are so many hasty 1 drops in this to make that first turn count for maximum value. Another way of thinking of this is we skip our first turn and move directly to our second turn, where our 1-drop creature is swinging right from the get-go. Any 3-drop spell in this deck, I want to be winning the game that turn or the next turn, and really this deck performs on that level very consistently. You don't see a lot of higher level spells for that reason, and also it is why we have trimmed back the mana base on this, because we never really need to or expect to have more than 3 mana in play in any given match.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, you can look at something like the current standard Azorius control deck, and this is pretty archetypal of control, although it does splash black in this case, but we have a very forgiving standard environment when it comes to 3 and 4 color mana bases. But as you can see here, the deck skips the 1-drop slot entirely. And really, the 2-drop slot is mostly reactionary things. Things that really fall into its game plan as opposed to simply being disruptive don't really start to occur until the 3-drop slot. And as you can see, that is where the main deck or the peak of the curve actually occurs. Then beyond that, we have a very healthy 4-drop slot that is still very much both disruptive as well as feeding its own game plan with things like Memory Deluge and its card draw. Then beyond that, we have a much stronger than usual 5 and beyond slot, carrying 6 slots there. And as you can see, this deck also runs 26 lands as opposed to the typical 23, 24, 25. Part of that is because of the 3 mana color bases, as well as the overall effect of the mana curve. Now, combo can be kind of a mixed bag depending upon what it is you're trying to accomplish. For instance, here we have a Goblin Charbelcher combo deck with a very low mana curve, and in fact 12 of its spells cost 0, another 14 cost only 1, and well, as you can see, you top out with just a copy or a few copies of Echo of Eons, and your critical spells are really at your 4-drop, where you expect to go off on turn 4 or oftentimes even sooner based on this particular build. As a more mid-range ramp style deck, you've got something like Titan Gates, where you have a very typical mana curve of 1s and 2s and 3 drops, and really just a couple of things there in the 4 or 5, although they are fairly critical additions to the deck. But overall, a pretty standard mana curve for something that is trying to go off in a combo style fashion. Then at the opposite extreme, you've got something like a colorless Ugin deck, where you have the deck starting really at 2 and 3 drops, some mechanical aspects at 4, and then really all of your heavy hitters are happening in that 7+ mana. In fact, you've got 4 cards with a 7, 4 with an 8, and 2 with a 10. So really about 20% of the deck land included is in that more than 7 mana range. So a very unusual mana curve for this style of ramp combo deck. In conclusion, I truly believe that one of the best things you can do as an arena player when building decks is to make sure that your mana base and your mana curve not only match, but that you understand and are utilizing the signal that that is sending to the various algorithms that are utilized by the arena client. Otherwise, you're going to be one of these people that is ranting about the shuffler being broken and whatnot, simply because the shuffler is trying to do a different job than what you want it to do. Same with hand smoothing and draw mechanisms and all of that. These things can work for you if you communicate to them properly and build your decks to do so, or they end up working against you, to many players' frustrations. Now, in a video coming your way very shortly, we will be tying all of these concepts together, going from a draft deck environment and building that up into a budget style deck and applying all of these different concepts. Additionally, we will be talking about the mix and ratio between creatures and non-creature spells, covering that at some length so that you have the right mix so that you are drawing the answers when you need them, as opposed to just drawing another dead on board creature. And before we go, I want to take just a moment to thank all of my patrons and remind the community, when we hit just 10 patrons at any level, we will be rolling out Discord for the entire community, not just paid patrons. So if you have the means or mind to do so, consider supporting our community as it continues to grow. And of course, supporting the community by liking, commenting, subscribing, or sharing our videos is always appreciated.